Hi everybody, my name's Nick. I'm here to talk about my favorite sensation and perception topic from this semester. I chose to talk about sound for my presentation because sound has a lot to do with music, and I'm a very musical person. I play guitar, piano, pretty much any percussive instrument I can get my hands on. I sing, I write my own music. Music is a big part of my life, so this is the topic that interested me the most. And specifically today, I'm going to be talking about how guitars produce sound. And in order to talk about how guitars and other instruments produce sound, you first have to have a conversation about what sound is. I know that in our textbook, it talked about how there's actually perceptual elements to what sound is, and that sound can be defined as when an organism perceives it and interprets it as a sound, and that's what a sound is. But I'm going to leave that out, and I'm just going to talk about sound as physical air pressure changes over time. That's it. Okay, and when these air pressure changes occur in patterns, they produce what are known as sound waves. And sound waves are like the bread and butter to how guitars produce sound. Okay, and there are two things that we have to talk about first before we get to the fun stuff, and that is frequency and amplitude. So I have an expert graph here that I freehand drew up for you guys. Ready for it? Prepare yourselves. Bada bing, bada boom. I mean, seriously, I might as well just apply for my PhD right now. Okay, but I tried to recreate a graph that I found in our textbook. And so on the bottom here, we have the passage of time of 1/100th of a second. And on this axis, you can see low to high frequency. I wrote here pitch, but I will talk about later. Pitch and frequency are very closely related. And so here we have a low frequency wave, a middle frequency wave, and a high frequency wave. And each of these dots represents the beginning of one wave. And the beginning of one wave to the beginning of the next wave is known as one cycle. And as we know, frequency is the number of cycles a wave goes through over a particular amount of time. So this low frequency wave has 1, 2, 3 cycles per 1/100th of a second. This middle frequency wave has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles per 1/100th of a second. And I think the top one has 10 cycles per 1/100th of a second, right? So if any of you have ever taken piano lessons and you know about high C, middle C, and low C, high C is going to produce a sound wave, if you could look at it, that looks more like this. Middle C is going to produce a sound wave that looks more like this one. And low C is going to produce a sound wave that looks more like this one. So the frequency of a sound wave is directly equivalent to the quality of the pitch that you're perceiving. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. Simple as that. So next, on to amplitude, which is different than frequency. And amplitude is just a fancy way of saying how loud a sound wave is, right? So here I have another, I promise it's the last one. I have another expert graph that I drew up for you guys to try and explain amplitude. That unfortunately is a little bit worse than the last one, but here we have again the passage of time, 1/100th of a second, and low to high, except this time it's amplitude. And I didn't do a very good job, but I tried to depict each of these three waves as having the same frequency. There's 3 cycles over 1/100th of a second, so they're all the same. The only way that these waves differ is in their amplitude. Okay, and you see it, I tried to pick this one as having like 1 unit of amplitude, this one having 2 units, and this one having 3 units. And all this means is as this wave diverts from the standard air pressure, it creates more drastic air pressure changes. And more drastic air pressure changes means that the sound is going to be heard as louder. And so this sound wave is going to be 3 times as loud as this sound wave. And that's all that means. Okay? There. On to the fun stuff. So what does frequency and amplitude have to do with how guitars are made? Well, we have to kind of have a little anatomy lesson on guitars first. So I have a standard 6-string acoustic guitar here I bought for $150 7 years ago. It's still kicking it. It's my favorite guitar. And so let's start with the parts of the guitar that everybody knows about first, right? The strings. Everybody knows a guitar has strings. This guitar has 6 strings. Some guitars have 12 strings. These 6 strings are tuned to E, A, D, G, B, and E. Notice I said E twice. One E is low E, one E is high E. I'll get to that later. traveling up, see where all the dots are? That's the fretboard. This is where you press all your fingers to make all the pretty notes. And then you have the neck of the guitar where you hold it. Okay, then you have the head of the guitar. This is where all the tuning mechanisms are, where you can tighten and loosen the strings to tune it to whatever note you want. All right, and down here is the body of the guitar. This is the part that you hold that makes it comfortable to strum. And you can see there's a big hole in the body of the guitar that actually plays a really important part. If this hole wasn't in your guitar would just sound flat and dead and really uninteresting, okay? Because when you strum over the sound hole of the guitar, sound enters the cavity, it reverberates, and it bounces off the surfaces and inside, and it comes back out and amplifies the sound. Without that hole, you would just sound like a piece of crap. You really would, okay? And the last part of the guitar I'm going to talk about is this part right here. It's the bridge of the guitar. These little pins just kind of staple each string in to keep each string taut over the sound hole to make it so that you can strum over it, okay? So how do guitars produce sound? All right, guitars produce sounds by vibrating strings, right? You pluck a string, it vibrates, it creates air pressure changes that travel through the air to your ear, and you hear it, okay? And I'm going to bring this close in here because you can actually see the string vibrating. It's really cool. You can actually see it vibrating, okay? And it creates air pressure changes, and if the string loses energy over time, it'll get quieter until eventually you'll hear nothing, okay? So that's a very basic definition of how guitars produce sound, but it's a little bit more complex than that because, as you can see, the guitar strings actually vary in thickness, and the thickness of the strings has a lot to do with the pitch it produces, okay? Because thicker strings are going to be wound looser on the neck of the guitar, and the thinner strings are going to be wound tighter on the neck of the guitar. And this has a very important thing to do with tension, right? The tighter a string is, the higher the frequency of the vibrations that's going to produce when you pluck the string. So that's why these thin strings up here sound higher. Because they're tighter, they're going to be vibrating at a higher frequency, and it's just going to sound like a higher pitch. And the lower ones are looser, they're going to vibrate slower and produce a lower pitch. Okay, but have you ever thought about when you come to the fretboard here, have you ever thought about why pressing your hands on the frets makes the sound go up? Even if it's the same thick string, why does the sound go up? And it has to do with tension, because you can produce the same effect like the thinner strings with your fingers. All right, so if I play an open E note and I go to another note, I'm increasing the tension on that string, and it's going to sound higher because it's vibrating at a higher frequency. And it's this simple element why I learned how to play Smoke on the Water when I was 12 years old. It's the very first song I ever learned how to play. It's the only thing I could play. And I'd play it on just the low E string over and over and over and over and over again, driving my family nuts. And it's because I could just play a song on one string, just increasing the tension. Here we go, Smoke on the Water. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now you know everything you need to know about sound and how guitars produce sound. No need to thank me. I have some other work I need to do tonight, so I'm going to get to it. Thank you. Have a good night.